Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Silicon Nubian YouTube channel. I should also point out that we do have an official Facebook presence and we have a blog on Blogspot. You're all more than welcome to check us out and follow us in both regards to show your support to what we're trying to do here. Today we have another Linux distribution review, this time another up-and-coming distribution called KaOS, K-A-O-S. Some people might call it KaOS, but after running it you'll realize and looking at this video that it's anything but. Very well thought out distribution with specific goals in mind. The developers of KaOS or KaOS are strictly KDE people. What we have here is the latest Plasma 5 desktop on display. They also only come pre-installed, or they only add pre-installed apps built using the Qt toolkit, and KaOS is 64-bit only. So have that in mind when you want to try it out. Here we see the login screen. We're going to log in right away. Very pleasant login screen. Logs in fairly fast, and here we have the default desktop that I got after installation. The post-installation desktop is quite Spartan, but I like that. Very pretty, reminds me of home. And here we have the Plasma 5 desktop. At the bottom we have the launch bar, obviously, over here. We're going to get into that in a moment. One thing that KDE 5 does allow you, and other, I guess, versions of KDE did as well, but this takes it to a new level, is how things are presented. We have, of course, at the bottom we have our mixer. KaOS uses Octopi as a software manager, which can be found on distributions that are based on Arch Linux. Because KaOS also uses Pac-Man in the background. Octopi is just a GUI front end for Pac-Man. But don't be mistaken, KaOS is not based on Arch Linux. Even though KaOS uses Pac-Man, and KaOS also is or adheres to the rolling release cycle, which I love, it is not based on any other distribution, at least according to them. They have built this from the ground up and made it very simple with respect to installing software. There are only three main repositories: core, main, and apps. And Octopi works very well. We're going to get into that a little bit later. Again, this is a rolling release distribution, which I am very fond of. I am very fond of that type of distribution where you install once, and through updates you always have the freshest operating system version. No need to go through the monolithic installs of new versions when they come out. As long as you keep up to date with your updates, things should be fine. Another thing that the KaOS developers stick to very strongly is their I guess their goal or their mantra. They're not interested in including every application known to mankind. They maintain their own, albeit smaller, repositories of applications and apps and downloads that they find suitable for KaOS. This doesn't mean that you are lacking software, or at least lacking quality software. All the quality software is there, and I'll show you soon what I mean. It's just that you won't have thousands of different web browsers and music players and whatnot. You'll have a good high quality selection in that the KaOS does not depend on any other person's repositories but their own, and they're very particular about what goes in there. So let's take a quick look at this Plasma 5 desktop. Initially it looks very simple, very Spartan, and I like that. Top here we have the dashboard. We have the icon for showing the dashboard. Widgets, of course, are supported. The look of it, I like what they've done. I like the initial look of KaOS in that it's very clean and very consistent. I said the same thing about Elementary OS, and it seems that the developers and designers of the KaOS experience have followed that same path. At the bottom we have the launch bar, icon bar. We're going to get into that in a minute. One thing I like about KaOS is that even the way it's presented to you, you're not locked into any kind of fashion or style or GUI presentation. There's a lot of things you can change in this, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. Here we have icons representing of course, the mixer Octopi, which is it's the Octopi notifier because it checks for updates. I believe that the standard interval for checking for updates is daily, but you can change that actually. It's configurable right here with set interval. See? Once a day at, once every 5 minutes, whatever. You can change that. Once a day seems good enough. Out of the box, that's another thing I have to mention. It seems like the KaOS, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, or KaOS, KaOS developers definitely have made, the majority of decisions they've made seem to be the good ones in terms of how it's presented, the defaults in many of the applications and settings and whatnot. This also is important, in particular if you're new to Linux, because it makes a much smoother out-of-box experience, which everybody appreciates. Even seasoned Linux veterans, after installing a Linux distribution, really that time of deep struggle and whatnot to get things the way you like it, sometimes it can be a little bit frustrating and time-consuming, obviously. Here we have the clipboard. Of course, there's a clipboard manager, instant messaging. We have networks, we're wired. We have to show the hidden icons, and there's a few notifications, battery, and brightness. This is, of course, important if you're on a laptop or mobile device. Bluetooth, which is Bluetooth support's included. Device notifier if you plug in other devices. KDE Connect, and printer setup. I like how they're all right here, and these are very common things that you would probably use on a regular basis, depending. And the inclusion of Bluetooth support right out the box, and the KDE Connect is very good for people who use portable devices, laptops, and whatnot. Here we have the clock, of course, and you can even change the way that looks. We have, there's so much different things you can do with this. You can go at this for a long time and just make it the way you like it. Right-clicking on the desktop brings up a standard set of choices. We have desktop settings. We have some beautiful wallpapers. Changing the wallpaper, of course, is as easy as just selecting it and going and clicking on apply. Of course, we can go through this very high quality. I've noticed in some of the more style, well, I can't call it style oriented because it's not just style oriented, but in a lot of the latest distributions which follow like Elementary OS and KaOS, obviously, where the look and feel are just as important as the foundation of the operating system, they've really taken their time to give you the options to make the OS experience very unique but very beautiful at the same time. These are some stunning backdrops here. I'm going to keep on that because that's where I'd like to be right now. And as we move on, we're going to go, we have 2 desktops right out of the box, and now we're going to go to the application menu. The application menu, much like the Windows 7 menu that we see, where you have categories and you have the list of applications in the category. Of course, it's Qt only out of the box, so we have a lot of Qt development tools. Education, we have Marble. Games, card games, just one. You know my feeling about games included. I'd like to include what I want, not being loaded with a bunch, so I applaud the KaOS developers for keeping that down. Graphics, a lot of the applications here may not be the ones that you might see in other distributions, but please remember, out of the box, KaOS is Qt toolkit only. So this, of course, it'll still run apps from other toolkits. In other words, it'll run every app that's available in its repository. So I don't want people to feel that this is what you're stuck with. Of course not. It's Linux. Linux is like Play-Doh. You can bend it and shape it the way you want. Internet, of course, we have their go-to browser is one I'm not familiar with that much. It's called Quipzilla. Quipzilla's crashed, but that was probably from a previous Quipzilla. It hasn't really crashed. Quipzilla is not my first choice for a web browser, but again, it's just what's included post-install. It is not necessarily what you're going to stick with, and you don't have to at all. You'll see that KaOS also, you can install some of the more popular browsers such as Chromium. We move on to continue with the internet. Konqueror, of course, is here. And that's another browser that's included. Konqueror is very well known for people who have been using KDE for quite a while. That's the KDE browser, I would call it. Office, we have Calligra, which is interesting as a choice, as OpenOffice, or excuse me, LibreOffice is not included by default, that is. But Calligra in of itself is a very capable Office package. I'm a LibreOffice user, but I will give Calligra a chance. But it's good to know that if I really wanted to, and we'll see later if LibreOffice is offered in the KaOS repositories. Again, remember, the KaOS developers are not really interested in throwing the kitchen sink of applications in the repositories. They're very particular about what goes in there, and they actually support their own repositories. So we're going to check that out. That'll be interesting. Settings, we have system settings. Very extensive list of GUI setting managers here. We have for window management, color, workspace, theme, font, icons. You go down to the workspace area. You go down to personalization, regional settings. Of course, you have network settings, hardware, printer, display, a lot of different things. System administration, system D administration, which is interesting. Configure the system D daemon. That, of course, is for more advanced Linux users, and KaOS does support those people as well as people fairly new to Linux. Now, if you see how the application menu is presented, it's much like Windows 7 or Cinnamon or whatnot. This can be changed very quickly. Right click, alternatives, switch, and now we have more of the original, with a twist, KDE menu. See what I'm saying about you having the option to make things look the way you like it? Well, definitely you do in KaOS. If you like this kind of menu, you could stick with it. If you don't, you can go back, alternatives, switch again, and now we are back to the Windows 7 style menu that we had before. It's not, those alternatives are not just present in the application menu. If, for example, let's start a few things here. I have to say that they call this a light running KDE distribution. I don't know if that's an oxymoron. I don't know what it means. KDE has always been known as a little bit heavier on system resources than most other GUIs out there, but I've noticed that the performance has been quite good even in a virtual machine. Mind you, this is running on a Intel i7 4790K, so I'm not I'd like to see how this works on lower end hardware, for example an i3 or whatnot. Of course, in this day and age, the addition of an SSD drive to any machine will boost the performance significantly. So I'm fairly certain that it'll run at a very impressive clip, given a machine like that. Here we're going to change something else too. We have, by default, the task manager or down the taskbar or task manager down here is only icon based. I don't really like that. Not very descriptive of what's happening, but we have alternatives. And here we have 3 alternatives. We could switch to a standard task manager which has icons plus description, which is great. Okay, there's also a different way as well. So we have, much like I see in my Windows 8 or Windows 7 or OS X, we have a little image of what's going on so we can keep track. Some people might actually like that better than icon only. I know I do. But the fact that you have the opportunity to change it is very good. And then we have a third alternative, which is window list. It switches, moves all the icons over there. I'm not a fan of that. I wish they would have stayed where they were. But that's how the window list works, I suppose. And here we have an icon that's here that shows us in a list what windows are running. Okay? And we could switch to them as we need be, or, you know, switch to them. I'm on the fence with this kind of look. Not really a fan of the window list per se. Of all 3 of them, I think the second one was the one I'd probably use. I can use anything. Generally, my Linux workstation at home is a dual monitor. So I find myself less needing to go to a Windows list because I have so much apps open, but I have dual 24-inch monitors, so it makes running multitasking a lot easier. Of course, I can go back to alternatives and go to the icon only, and there we go. Now we're back to the icons. This is permeates through all of Plasma 5, by the way. There's configurability options to make it look the way you want, and I love it. At first, it might be daunting for the new user to have so much choice, but in the end, what you end up with, very simply, by the way, is the look and feel of a workspace that's specific to you, the user, individually. And I like that. I like that a lot. You're not shoehorned into one type of look or feel. Even for the clock, we have alternatives. You want a clock, analog clock, digital clock, fuzzy clock. It's it never stops. You want an analog clock. There we are. Alternatives, not very pleasant actually, the analog clock. I'll go back to the digital clock. So we have a lot of ways of doing things and making it look absolutely different. Yet the functionality, undercore functionality, is still there. Now, if we move over to the system, of course, here we are. As I'm running it right now, the operating system, just with sysguard open, is using over half a gig of memory. It's using, from what I'm seeing, 0.55 gigabytes of actual live memory, which is not that bad actually. It's running it's more lean than KDE 4 if I remember properly, and I hope people can post here what they think about that statement. It's doing quite well. No complaints there. On modern systems, this is going to be it's not much of a load at all. CPU load is jumping around between 0 and, at the moment, 2%. Of course, if I move my mouse, it'll go a little higher, and then it'll stop, it'll go down. Of course, this again is working in a virtual machine. You'll see that even though I have an i7 with 4 real cores and 4 virtual, multi-threading, 4 virtual cores, I've only given this virtual machine access to 2 cores, and it's running pretty good. Between 0 and 2%, nothing major, and that's at idle. Our process table will go by memory. Plasma Shell is using right now 234,372K. Memory usage is saying me right now, this is the interesting thing, even though that told me, system load might have told me that, process table is telling me something, well, it's approximately the same, 228.9 megabytes out of 3.9 gigabytes available. So the Plasma Shell itself, from what I can see, is a definite improvement over KDE 4 in terms of system resources, usage, that is. We have, the next one is Xorg, of course, using around 36, 37 megs. So all in all, and then we have a bunch of ancillary smaller functions that are using much less RAM. The two that I see the most are the Plasma Shell and Xorg, of course, which runs the back end for the GUI. So that's on a terms of resource is necessary to run KaOS. I would probably, for a comfortable experience, I believe a Core 2 Duo will do it. With a, I don't think video will be much of it. It would be nice to have a slightly capable video card for all the effects and whatnot, but nothing crazy. Right now, on my Linux workstation, I have an NVIDIA 550 Ti based card that I picked up for $50. EVGA GTX 550 Ti, and it's not a crazy card by any standards, but it runs the dual monitor and it runs it very fast. I am partial to NVIDIA cards on Linux over AMD ATI cards only because of the quality of the driver, but supposedly in the last couple months things have changed a little bit. Not in that NVIDIA is gotten any worse, just that AMD has stepped up their game somewhat, but that'll be for another video. Running KaOS, again, the minimum specs that I would say for a comfortable environment would be a capable Core 2 Duo chip, 2 gigs of RAM, preferably 3 or 4, and hard drive space depends on what you want to do with it. Hard drives these days are so inexpensive. A 1 terabyte can be had for under $50 if you buy it on sale. And again, I have to tell you that the addition of an SSD to any system built within the last, let's say, 4 to 5 years will show a massive improvement in performance. And what I do with my all my workstations and my Linux workstations, I have a 120 gig or even a 240 or 50 gig SSD boot drive, and I also include a 1 terabyte spinner hard drive for data and storage and downloads and whatnot. So how would I rate KaOS out of 10? Very difficult. I'd presently give it a solid 8. 8.5. I haven't run into any problems. Again, I'm working on virtual hardware, not real hardware. So I can't say that I've run into anything that has made me wonder and made me think, I'm not too sure about it. And I'm trying to get stuff done here. Maybe my internet's not working correctly. We'll see. It's one to watch, most definitely. I do have to point out that the version I'm running is 2015.4, I believe, either 0.4, 0.5, 0.4, and it's in definite steady development. if you're going to put it on a mission critical box out there, a mission critical computer that you need every day to work perfectly, I would be skeptical about doing that. It's a smaller community, smaller developer base. It is a great distribution, don't get me wrong. For daily tasks, you want to just get on your machine, do your work, do a little surfing, type up some documents and whatnot. If you're in a business environment and everything is critical computing, I'd stick with one of the bigger players out there. But in terms of having a desktop environment that is very pleasing to use, KaOS is right up there. Definitely, the KDE Plasma 5 desktop is very functional, extremely full of configuration options and whatnot, and the way that it's presented in KaOS, I like it a lot. In the next step, we're going to look at what applications may or may not be available. Remember, I said that they maintain their own repositories. When you start Octopi, it automatically syncs with the three major categories in the or repositories: core, main, and apps. Let's see if we can find a different Office suite. Yes, LibreOffice is available. At least those are the language packs. Okay, we have LibreOffice over here. LibreOffice is definitely available. That's great. Let's go to, and that's in their repository. Now we're in version 4432. Pretty recent. Now let's go to Chromium. Google Chrome is available, version 45. Let's see Firefox. Firefox is available. Here we are, Firefox. I like the Octopi. I mean, it looks a lot like apt, like the GUI for apt-get, but it's pretty easy to go through. You have info tab for those who don't know. You can look at what it's all about. Some news. News always brings up the same thing. This is KaOS news. This isn't news related to the files that you have selected, by the way. Here we are. Let's see now. Opera. Opera web browser version 30 is also available. I'm not sure if that's the latest version, but I'll have to double check that. So all in all, there's a lot of stuff that's there that I would use. Your mileage may vary, but yes, there's a lot of things that I would use definitely that are there. Of course, we have the almighty console. Can't live without that. Definitely not. Let's jump a little bit to KaOS Information Center, which is basically the KDE Information Center. And of course, it gives you a lot of. Right now, it's telling me I'm using just about a gig of RAM. Of course, that includes shared memory, which isn't that much. So let's wrap this up now. It's been almost half an hour. My take on KaOS is it's definitely one to watch, one to try out. Kick the tires, see if you like it. It's in steady development. I'm hoping that its community grows and it becomes much stronger. We need Linux distribution releases like this. We need Linux distributions like KaOS. We definitely need Linux distributions like Elementary OS. The foundations of Linux are excellent, very secure, very solid. Now the presentation part of it, and I like what I'm seeing in distributions like KaOS and Elementary OS. In a way, it's kind of re-sparked. I've always had interest in Linux, but this is different now. This is not just a technical interest in it. This is also a functional and a visual interest in it. And I'm very happy with what I see here in KaOS. I give it a solid 8 to 8.5 out of 10. My reservations are for, if I have any reservations, is about the community, the growth of it, the continued growth of KaOS. and its longevity in the Linux scene. Thanks once again for tuning in to another, this time a little bit more in-depth review of one of the latest Linux distributions, KaOS. And please check out my blog, PC Enthusiasts and Tech, on Blogspot, and my company page on Facebook, Silicon Nubian. Like the page and help it to grow and reach more people. Thanks a lot, and see you soon for the next video.